I'll never forget my first summer job. I was 16, working at a small arcade by the beach, mostly just trying to make some extra cash for the summer. It was my dream job at the time, playing games, eating junk food, and getting paid for it. But one night, something happened that made me wish I'd never set foot there. It started with a stupid mistake. I was texting a friend on my phone while cleaning up the game room after hours. I wasn't paying attention, and before I knew it, my phone slipped right out of my hands and fell through one of the cracks between the wooden planks of the pier below. At first, I thought maybe I could just leave it. I could probably get a new one. Whatever, right? But of course, that wasn't going to happen. The thought of losing my phone, the only thing that connected me to the outside world, kept nagging at me. So I decided to go after it. I waited until closing time, when everyone else had left. The pier looked different at night, darker, quieter. I grabbed a flashlight and walked under the pier, my feet crunching on the sand as the salty wind whipped around me. The beams that held up the pier creaked in the wind, and I shuddered, feeling like something was off. But it wasn't until I saw it, my phone, lying there on the damp sand, that things started to feel really wrong. I reached down to grab my phone, but then I froze. Something caught my eye beneath the beam where the phone had fallen. It was an old, rotting sleeping bag, half hidden by some trash and sand. It looked like it had been there for a long time, decayed, dirty, and stained with something I didn't want to get too close to. As I stepped closer, I noticed food wrappers scattered around it, candy, chips, things that looked like they'd been left behind by someone living under the pier. There was a bucket too, tucked in the corner. I squinted, trying to make out what was inside, and immediately regretted it. The smell hit me like a punch to the stomach, a mixture of rot, something sour, and something much worse. I could barely breathe as I backed away, but my feet got stuck in the sand and I stumbled. Before I could pull myself together, I heard someone, moving. The sound came from the shadows beneath the pier. It wasn't an animal or the wind, it was crawling. Slow, deliberate, like something dragging itself through the sand. My heart skipped a beat and my breath caught in my throat. I didn't move. I just stood there, too scared to even turn around. The crawling grew louder, closer, and I felt like I was trapped. The beam above me creaked again, but this time, I heard a faint rasping sound, like something, or someone, was breathing heavily from the dark. I should have run. I know that now, but I couldn't move. I just kept standing there, frozen, trying to tell myself it was just some weird animal or maybe a homeless person. I kept telling myself that, but the sound, God, it was getting closer, and the air felt heavier, like something was pressing down on me. Then I saw it. A figure, barely visible in the dark, slithering along the sand beneath the pier. It wasn't walking. It wasn't even crawling the way a person should. It was dragging itself, like it was too weak to stand, its body scraping against the ground. I couldn't see its face, but I could tell. Whatever it was looking right at me. I don't know how long I stood there, too terrified to move. My phone, the one I had come to retrieve, was lying forgotten on the sand. The figure was so close now that I could hear its labored breathing. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. My throat was dry, my limbs frozen, as if something was holding me in place. Then, in a low, raspy voice, I heard it. "You should have left it." The words sent a chill through my spine. I couldn't make sense of it. It was like it knew I shouldn't have come down here, knew I had made a mistake. And then, just as suddenly as it started, the crawling stopped. The air shifted again. Quiet, too quiet. I didn't wait. I didn't think. I ran. I ran without looking back, my feet slapping against the sand as I sprinted toward the pier's stairs. I didn't care about the phone anymore, or even what had just happened. I just needed to get out of there, to escape that suffocating feeling that something was still watching me. When I reached the arcade, I slammed the door behind me and locked it, panting and trying to calm my racing heart. I leaned against the counter, my hands shaking as I gripped the edge. The thought of going back under the pier to get my phone was laughable now. I was done. I didn't tell anyone about it. I didn't even tell my boss why I was late the next day. I just kept my head down, praying the whole time that I hadn't brought something back with me. Days later, I got a text from my own number. I froze when I saw it. There was no name, no context, Just the message. You should have left it. I stared at the screen, trying to figure out who could have sent it. I didn't remember giving my number to anyone else. My phone was still the same one I'd dropped, and there was no way it had been tampered with. I wanted to shrug it off, but the more I thought about it, the more I felt that same unease, that creeping sensation that something wasn't right. I tried deleting the message, but it kept coming back, no matter how many times I erased it. And no matter what I did, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, like I hadn't left the pier behind after all. I couldn't focus, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, all I could see was that thing crawling toward me in the dark. The smell, the sound of its breathing, the way it moved, it all replayed in my head, over and over. I even started to get paranoid, thinking I'd hear it crawling behind me on the street, or feel eyes on me when I was alone in my room. I started double-checking doors and windows, even though I knew it was ridiculous. I didn't want to go near the pier again, but something kept pulling me back. A few nights later, I decided to go back. Not to the pier, not under it, but just to the arcade. I needed to see if everything was still normal, if nothing had changed. I told myself I was just being stupid, that it was all in my head. But when I got there, something was different. It wasn't the arcade itself. It was the air, the atmosphere, like it was thicker somehow, heavier. It felt wrong. The lights flickered as I walked inside, and the floor creaked under my feet in a way that made me feel like I was walking on something that wasn't supposed to be there. Then, I saw it. A mark on the floor near the counter, wet, like something had been dragged through the building. It led toward the back door where the staff kept their supplies. My heart sank. I didn't want to follow it, but I did. I stepped closer to the door and pushed it open. I stood there for a second, trying to talk myself out of going further, but I couldn't just ignore it. Not after everything that had happened. I took a step inside the supply room, my breath catching in my chest. The air was damp, the smell of old wood and stale air mixing with something else, something foul, like rotten food. That's when I saw it. There in the corner of the room was a torn sleeping bag, just like the one I'd seen under the pier. I froze, feeling the blood drain from my face. It was impossible. It had to be a coincidence. But as I looked around, I saw more of the same. Food wrappers scattered across the floor. The same ones I had seen near the bucket. The same bucket that had stunk so badly that I almost threw up. My mind was racing, my heart pounding in my chest. There was no way this was happening again. It couldn't be. I backed away from the sleeping bag, but my feet hit something behind me. Something soft, squishy, wet. I turned around and found a bucket sitting in the corner of the room. The lid was slightly ajar, and I could smell the rancid stench wafting from it. My stomach churned. Without thinking, I pulled the lid off, and I wish I hadn't. Inside the bucket was a dark, sludgy mess that looked like something had been decaying in there for days. I couldn't look away, my body paralyzed by fear. And then, just like before, the crawling sound, the same dragging movement I'd heard under the pier, echoed in the room, and I knew I wasn't alone. I could hear the faintest rasping breath coming from the back of the room. I didn't wait to see what it was. I ran. I don't know how I made it out of that room or out of the arcade. I just ran, and I didn't stop until I was home. I locked all the doors, closed the blinds, and tried to act like everything was normal, but nothing felt normal anymore. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was following me, that something was watching from the shadows. The worst part? The next day, when I checked my phone, there was another message. Again, from my own number. You should have left it. Deleted it like I had with the other ones, but this time, I swear I heard a noise, like someone crawling just outside my window. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't sleep the night after that either. It's been weeks now, and it hasn't stopped. I don't go near the pier, I don't use my phone like I used to, and I haven't told anyone about what happened. Not really. I don't want to sound crazy, but every time I check my messages, there it is again. You should have left it. I don't know who's doing it or what they want, but I can't shake the feeling that whatever was under that pier, whatever followed me back, isn't done with me yet. And every time I try to forget, the messages remind me that it's still out there, waiting. It was October 2022, mid-semester, and I'd decided to drive 6 hours alone to visit my cousin in Maine. I'd pulled over at this dingy boardwalk near Portsmouth around 10 p.m. because my coffee had caught up to me, and the next rest stop was 50 miles away. The place was practically abandoned, just a few flickering lampposts, a closed ice cream stand, and the sound of waves slapping the pilings below. The air smelled like salt and rotting wood, and the only sign of life was a single seagull, perched on a rusted trash can, staring at me like I was the intruder. My phone had no service, but I figured I'd be quick, just in and out. That's what I told myself as I jogged toward the restroom, my sneakers crunching on broken shells. The restroom was a concrete box with a flickering open sign and graffiti that read, "Don't trust the mirrors," in jagged red letters. The door creaked like it hadn't been oiled in decades. Inside, it was colder than outside, the kind of chill that sticks to your skin. I headed to the middle stall, but as soon as I stepped in, the door behind me slammed shut so hard the walls rattled. I whirled around, yanked the handle, locked. My heart dropped. "Hello?" I shouted, but the only reply was the fluorescent light above me buzzing like a trapped wasp. Then, from the stall to my left came 3 slow knocks. Knock, knock, knock. I crouched down to peek under the gap. Nothing. No shoes, no shadow. Just dusty tiles. Then the knocking started again, louder, from the stall directly across from me. The air got thicker, like the walls were breathing in, and the flickering light cast jagged shadows that made the graffiti seem alive. I slammed my shoulder against the door, but it didn't budge. Not even a shudder. My breath came out in white puffs now, though I couldn't tell if it was from the cold or pure panic. The knocking shifted again, this time from every stall, rhythmic and mocking. Knock, knock, knock. I kicked the stall door open, half expecting some prankster to laugh, but the room was empty. Then the fluorescent light died completely, plunging me into darkness. For a heartbeat, all I heard was my own ragged breathing. Then, from right behind my ear, a wet, guttural whisper, "Hurry!" I screamed and tripped backward into the sink, elbows smacking porcelain. The light flickered back on and the stalls were all wide open, doors swinging lazily. My reflection in the mirror looked wrong, pale, distorted, like someone had smudged the glass with their thumb. That's when I noticed the lock on the main door. It wasn't a deadbolt, just a rusty latch. I lunged for it, hands shaking so badly I could barely grip, and finally wrenched it sideways. The door flew open with a screech, and I stumbled into the night air, gasping. That's when I saw him, a janitor in a faded gray uniform, standing 10 feet away under a lamppost. He held a massive ring of keys, jangling softly in the wind, and his eyes were too wide, too bright, like they'd never blinked once in his life. The janitor didn't move, just stared at me with this weird, tilted smile like he'd been waiting. My legs were jelly, but I forced myself to step forward. "Hey man," I choked out, trying to sound calm. "What the hell was that in there?" His smile didn't waver. He lifted one bony finger and pointed past me, back at the restroom. The open sign was now dark, and the door hung slightly ajar, shadows pooling in the gap like something was breathing behind it. The keys on his ring clinked together, though there was no wind. Then, in a voice that sounded like it had been dug up from wet earth, he muttered, "You weren't supposed to come in here." Before I could respond, he turned and walked toward the boardwalk, his boots scuffing against the pavement in a slow, uneven rhythm. I wanted to run, but my body was locked in place, my pulse hammering in my throat. The seagull from earlier was gone. The ocean had gone eerily quiet, like the tide itself was holding its last breath. Then from inside the restroom, a new sound, a wet, dragging noise like something heavy being pulled across the floor. The door creaked open another inch. That's when I saw it. A hand, pale and glistening, fingers curling around the edge of the door frame. Not human. Too long. Too wrong. I finally snapped out of it and bolted to my car, fumbling with the keys as the restroom door groaned open behind me. The engine roared to life, and I didn't look back, not even when I heard the janitor's voice again, this time right outside my window, whispering, "Next time, knock first." The tires screeched as I peeled onto the highway, my hands shaking so badly I could barely grip the wheel. It wasn't until I hit the interstate that I realized my phone had service again. 3 missed calls from my cousin. I answered on the 4th ring, my voice raw. "Dude," he said, laughing, "you're not gonna believe this, but that boardwalk's been closed for years. Some kid died in that bathroom back in the 90s. They say if you knock, he..." I hung up. The reflection in my rearview mirror wasn't mine. It was smiling. I drove straight to a 24-hour diner and sat under the fluorescent lights until sunrise, too scared to close my eyes. The waitress kept refilling my coffee, giving me weird looks, but I didn't care. When I finally mustered the courage to check my phone, I found a voicemail from an unknown number. Just static, and then clear as day, 3 knocks. Knock, knock, knock. I deleted it immediately. The next morning, I took the longest route home possible, avoiding that stretch of coast entirely. But sometimes, when I'm alone at night, I hear it again. That slow, deliberate knocking. And I know eventually I'll have to answer. For weeks after, I couldn't sleep without a light on. Every creak of my apartment floorboards made me jerk awake, heart racing. I started researching online and found a local forum where people told similar stories about that boardwalk. One post from 2007 stood out. A trucker described seeing a janitor mopping up something black and shiny near those restrooms at 3 a.m. The weirdest part? When I zoomed in on the grainy photo he'd posted, I could swear the mop bucket was full of what looked like long, wet hair. My hands shook so badly I spilled coffee on my keyboard. Last month, I drove past the exit for that boardwalk during daylight. The place looked even more decayed than I remembered. Half the planks missing, the ice cream stand collapsed in on itself. But as I slowed down, I saw something that made my blood freeze. That same damn seagull was perched in the exact same spot, staring at my car with its head cocked. And behind it, barely visible in the shadows of the boarded-up restroom doorway, stood a tall figure in gray. I hit the gas so hard my tires smoked. When I dared check the rear view, both the bird and the figure were gone. But etched into the condensation on my back window were 3 faint lines, like claw marks. I told my therapist about everything, minus the supernatural parts. She suggested PTSD from being trapped and wrote me a prescription for sleeping pills. They don't help much, because now, no matter where I am, sometimes when I use a public restroom, the lights will flicker in that same uneven pattern. And once in a gas station outside Albany, I heard 3 soft knocks from the stall next to mine. When I ran out without washing my hands, the clerk gave me a knowing look. "You saw him, huh?" he said casually, like we were discussing the weather. Old Charlie still likes to remind people he's around. These days I hold it until I find a crowded, well-lit bathroom. And I always knock before entering. Because here's the thing no one tells you about trauma. It's not the memory that haunts you. It's the certainty that next time, you might not get out. That next time, the janitor won't be outside waiting. He'll be in the stall with you, jangling those rusted keys, asking why you didn't listen the first time. Sometimes at night when the wind rattles my windows just right, it sounds like laughter. And I wonder if Charlie's found someone new to play with, or if he's just reminding me he hasn't forgotten. It was one of those dead-end Friday nights where the boardwalk was weirdly empty. No drunk tourists stumbling around, no couples laughing under the streetlights. Just me, my car, and the app pinging with a ride request near the pier. The guy's profile was blank. No picture, no name, just a rating of 5.0. Whatever, I've picked up worse. When I pulled up, he was already standing under a flickering lamp, shoulders hunched like he was freezing despite the warm air. Didn't say a word when he got in. Just slid into the back seat and slumped forward, head down like he'd passed out before we even moved. I figured maybe he was exhausted or high or just didn't want to talk. But the way his body sagged, it was too still. Like a mannequin someone dropped into my car. I kept glancing at the rearview mirror, waiting for him to shift or snore or something. The streetlights cut through the car in flashes, lighting up his slumped shape for a second before plunging us back into dark. My fingers tapped. The wheel. Nervous habit. At a red light, I cleared my throat loud enough to wake up a coma patient. No response. That's when I turned around fully, ready to nudge his knee or ask if he was okay. But the seat was empty. Just the dent in the fabric where he'd been sitting, still warm. My stomach dropped. I fumbled for my phone. Maybe the app glitched. Maybe he'd bailed mid-ride. But no, the trip timer was still running. Then my screen lit up with a notification. 3 words. I'm still here. I swear my heart just stopped for a second. I stared at the message, then at the back seat. Empty, but suddenly feeling smaller, like the air had thickened. The light turned green. Behind me, a car honked. I hit the gas too hard, my hands shaking. Maybe it was a prank. Maybe the guy had ducked down and was messing with me. I forced myself to check the mirror again, half expecting to see him grinning up from the floor. Nothing. Just my own wide eyes staring back. The app pinged again. Same. Notification. I'm still here. This time, the letters looked wrong, like they'd been typed too slowly, each one smudged on the screen. I should have canceled the ride, pulled over, called the cops, but my brain short-circuited. I just kept driving. Like if I finished the trip, this would all go away. The GPS route led us away from the boardwalk, into this maze of side streets with no streetlights. Wrong turn after wrong turn, but the app didn't reroute. It just flashed 5 minutes to destination, for 20 straight minutes. The back seat smelled suddenly sour, like wet clothes left in a trunk too long. I cracked the window, gulping cold air, when I felt it. A breath on the back of my neck. Not wind. Something shaped. I didn't turn around. Couldn't. The app buzzed in my cup holder. You're going the wrong way. My knuckles were white around the wheel. The GPS had frozen, stuck on a street name I didn't recognize, Blackwater Lane. But the map showed just empty grid lines, like the road didn't exist. I tried to tell myself it was a glitch, but then the temperature dropped. Not just cold, sharp, like stepping into a walk-in freezer. My breath fogged the windshield, and for a second, I saw something move in the condensation. A handprint, too large to be mine, smearing the glass from the inside. I wiped it furiously with my sleeve, but the fog kept spreading, creeping from the edges like something was breathing against it. The app chimed again. Turn left. Left was a dead end. I don't know why I obeyed. Maybe because arguing with a ghost felt stupider than driving into a brick wall. The headlights lit up a chain-link fence, graffiti torn up like claw marks. That's when I heard it. A wet, rhythmic sound from the back seat. Not breathing. Chewing. My throat locked. I couldn't look. Couldn't not look. In the rear view, the shadows pooled too thick, but there was a shape now, shoulders hunched, head tilted at a sick angle. Not slumped asleep. Waiting. The app flashed. You're almost there. The trip fare kept climbing. $27.50, $27.50, $28.75, numbers ticking up like a countdown. My phone screen pulsed red, then black. When it lit back up, the message was different. I never left the car. The chewing stopped. Silence except for the engine idling too loud like the car was gasping. My phone died. No warning. Just a black screen that refused to turn back on. That's when I noticed the seats. The backrest was dented inward now, fabric stretched taut, as if someone was pressing against it from behind. I couldn't move, couldn't even blink. Then the weight shifted. Slowly, deliberately, the headrest above my right shoulder dipped down, like fingers were gripping it. The smell got worse, mold and copper, like old blood soaked into floor mats. I wanted to scream, but my lungs were frozen. The rearview mirror showed nothing, just me, wide-eyed, and the empty seat. But I felt it, the way you feel a spider on your neck before you see it. I slammed the brakes. The seatbelt locked, choking me. For one stupid second, I thought I'd crash. That pain would make this stop. But the car just shuddered to a halt, engine still running. The back seat was empty again, no dents, no smell. Even my phone buzzed back to life. The app opened to the trip screen. Destination reached. The map showed we were back on the boardwalk right where I'd picked him up. The fare? $66.60. I laughed. Hysterical, jagged sounds that didn't sound human. The payment processed automatically. Then a new notification. Thank you for the ride. Under it, a photo. My own face taken from the back seat. Eyes wide, mouth open, mid-scream. Timestamp, 3:33 a.m. But I hadn't screamed. Not yet. I threw the door open and stumbled onto the boardwalk. The pavement cold under my bare hands. I didn't even remember unbuckling. The car was empty. Had to be empty. But when I grabbed my phone to call someone, the screen flickered to life again, showing the back seat in grainy night vision green. Something was there, curled on the floor. Not a man. Not anymore. Just a shadow with too many joints. One arm stretched toward the front seat, fingers brushing the headrest. The app notification blinked. Next ride in 3 minutes. I could hear the engine still running. the driver's side door wide open like an invitation. I ran, didn't look back, didn't stop until I hit the pier, where the streetlights pooled in sickly yellow circles. My phone buzzed one last time in my pocket. I almost didn't check. But there, it was, a 5-star rating left by the passenger. No comment, just a single emoji. The app logged me out immediately after, like it had been waiting. I never drove for them again. But sometimes, late at night, I'll see a car idling too long at the curb, headlights off, and when I peer inside just for a second, the backseat looks dented,